The bedroom door burst open at 2 a.m., and Sarah Monroe found herself staring at two identical 6-year-old faces, covered in what looked like mascara and lipstick, holding scissors they'd clearly just used on each other's hair. But what stopped her cold wasn't the chaos. It was the way the boy, Ethan, was humming a melody she hadn't heard in 7 years. A melody from a life she thought she'd left behind forever. Her hand went to her throat, and she whispered a single word that made both children freeze. Hush-a-bye. How could they possibly know that song? 2 days earlier, Sarah had stood outside the iron gates of the Whitmore estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, her beaten Honda Civic looking like a stain on the pristine circular driveway. She'd responded to a classified ad that promised double the standard nanny rate, and God knew she needed it. Her daughter, Mia, was starting physical therapy next month, and the medical bills from the car accident 6 months ago were drowning them both. Sarah was 32 years old, and she'd learned the hard way that desperation had a smell rich people could detect from a mile away. The house looked like something from Architecture magazine. All glass and steel and perfectly manicured hedges that probably cost more to maintain than Sarah made in a year. She pressed the intercom button with a finger that trembled slightly, hating herself for the weakness. State your name and business. The voice was clipped, female, efficient. Sarah Monroe. I'm here about the nanny position. A pause, then a buzz as the gate swung open. Sarah drove up the curved driveway, parking her car as far from the house as she could manage, as if distance might somehow make it less obvious how out of place she was. She'd worn her best interview outfit, a navy blazer she'd found at Goodwill and black slacks that were only slightly too short, and she'd pulled her dark hair back into a neat bun that she hoped looked professional rather than severe. The woman who answered the door was in her late 50s, dressed in what Sarah recognized as designer clothes, even though she couldn't have named the brand. Her silver hair was cut in a sharp bob, and her eyes were the kind of pale blue that seemed to see through polite lies. Mrs. Chun, the woman said, not offering her hand. I manage the household. You're the 4th interview today, so let's not waste time. The position pays $60,000 a year, live-in, full benefits. The catch is that no one lasts more than 3 weeks. Sarah blinked. I'm sorry, the Whitmore twins. Mrs. Chin stepped aside, gesturing for Sarah to enter. Ethan and Emma, 6 years old, brilliant, and utterly unmanageable. Their father, Mr. James Whitmore, is a venture capitalist who works 90-hour weeks. Their mother passed away when they were infants, 7 years ago. The number hit Sarah like a slap, but she kept her face neutral. What happened to the previous nannies? The first one quit after they reprogrammed her phone to send embarrassing texts to her boyfriend. The second one left after they convinced her she was being haunted by releasing helium balloons in her room at night and playing recordings through the baby monitor. The third one, well, she's threatening to sue, but that's confidential. Mrs. Chen's expression didn't change. Mr. Whitmore is offering double pay because he's running out of options. The children will be home in an hour. If you can survive until bedtime without running for the door, we'll discuss next steps. Sarah should have walked away. Every instinct she'd honed through years of bad decisions, and worse luck, told her this was a trap. But Mia needed that physical therapy, and $60,000 a year was more than Sarah had earned in her entire adult life. I'll stay, she said. Mrs. Chin nodded, something that might have been respect flickering in her pale eyes. Your room is on the 3rd floor. I suggest you settle in and prepare yourself. The twins are creative, and they don't like new people. The room was larger than Sarah's entire apartment, with a queen bed covered in white linens and a window that overlooked the estate's garden. Sarah set down her single duffel bag. All her possessions fit into one bag now, and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to steady her breathing. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to her sister, Jen, who was watching Mia for the day. Got the job. Wish me luck. The response came immediately. You sure about this? Rich people are weird. Sarah smiled despite herself. Weird pays for PT. Tell Mia I love her. She heard them before she saw them. A symphony of crashes and shouts coming from somewhere on the 1st floor. Sarah descended the grand staircase to find Mrs. Chun standing with her arms crossed in the foyer, looking resigned, while 2 small figures sprinted through the hall with what appeared to be fencing swords, chasing a very distressed Persian cat. "Children," Mrs. Chen said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "This is Miss Monroe, your new nanny." Both twins skidded to a stop, their identical faces, sharp features, startling green eyes, dark hair that fell in unruly waves, turning toward Sarah with expressions of pure calculation. They wore matching private school uniforms that had clearly been through a war. "Hello," Sarah said, keeping her voice neutral. "You can call me Sarah." "How long do you think you'll last?" Emma asked, tilting her head. "Our record is 11 days. Mrs. Patterson almost made it to 2 weeks, but then she found the frogs in her bathtub." "I'm not easily scared," Sarah said, which was true. When you'd spent 3 years in an abusive marriage and escaped with nothing but the clothes on your back and a baby, frogs seemed manageable. "We'll see," Ethan said, and there was something in his voice, a melody to it, a cadence, that made Sarah's chest tighten. She pushed the thought away. Lots of kids had musical voices. It didn't mean anything. The first test came within an hour. Sarah was unpacking her meager belongings when she heard screaming from downstairs, the kind of blood-curdling shriek that suggested actual murder. She bolted down the stairs to find both twins on the kitchen floor, Emma clutching her arm and wailing while red liquid pooled around her. "She's bleeding," Ethan shouted, his face pale. "She cut herself on the broken glass." Sarah's nurse training, 3 years at community college before she dropped out to get married, a decision she regretted every day, kicked in automatically. She knelt beside Emma, gently moving the girl's hand to examine the wound. Her fingers came away sticky, and she brought them to her nose. "Corn syrup and food coloring, not blood." "Nice try," Sarah said calmly. "But next time, use less red dye. Real blood is darker." Both twins froze, staring at her. Then slowly, Emma started to grin. "You didn't even flinch," the girl said, sitting up. "My daughter broke her arm last year," Sarah said, which was a lie. Mia's injuries from the accident had been much worse than a broken arm, but close enough to the truth. "I've seen real blood. This is just corn syrup. You probably used the recipe from the internet that doesn't include the chocolate syrup to darken it." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "You have a daughter?" "Yes. She's 8. Her name is Mia." "Where is she?" Emma asked, and there was something in the question that felt less like curiosity and more like an interrogation. "With my sister. I'm live-in, so I'll see her on weekends." "Does she look like you?" Ethan's voice was quiet now, almost careful. Sarah felt that strange tightness in her chest again. "People say so. Same dark hair, same stubborn chin." The twins exchanged a glance, one of those silent conversations that siblings who were close could have without words. Then Emma stood up, brushing fake blood off her uniform. "Okay," she said. "You passed test 1. How many tests are there?" Sarah asked. "We'll let you know," Ethan said, and then they both disappeared up the stairs, leaving Sarah alone with Mrs. Chun, who had materialized in the doorway. "Congratulations," the older woman said dryly. "You've survived longer than the last nanny, and you've been here less than 2 hours. Don't get comfortable. The real tests always come at night." That night, Sarah learned what Mrs. Chen meant. She just dozed off when she heard the sound of small feet in the hallway outside her room. Then voices, the twins, whispering urgently to each other. She stayed still, listening. "Do you think she's the one?" Emma's voice, barely audible. "I don't know. But did you see the way she looked at us? Like she was remembering something. We need to be sure. If we're wrong." "I know. But Emma, what if we're right?" Sarah's heart was pounding now. What were they talking about? She heard them move away, their footsteps fading down the hall, and she lay in the darkness, trying to make sense of the conversation. The one what? Right about what? She must have fallen asleep eventually, because the next thing she knew, sunlight was streaming through the window, and someone was knocking on her door. Mrs. Chun, with a breakfast tray and a tight smile. "The children are requesting you specifically this morning," she said. "They want you to take them to school." Sarah showered quickly and dressed in jeans and a sweater. She had a feeling the blazer would make her look like she was trying too hard. and met the twins in the foyer. They were both wearing fresh uniforms, their hair neatly brushed, looking like completely different children from the chaos agents she'd met yesterday. "Ready?" she asked. "We need to stop somewhere first," Ethan said. "There's a park on the way. We want to show you something." Sarah glanced at Mrs. Chun, who shrugged. "You have 30 minutes before school starts. It's your call." They drove to a small park about a mile from the estate, and the twins led her to a bench near a playground that had seen better days. This wasn't the kind of place she'd expected Billionaire's children to frequent. The equipment was old, the paint was chipped, and the surrounding neighborhood was decidedly working class. "Why here?" Sarah asked. Emma sat down on the bench, and Ethan stood beside her, both of them suddenly looking younger than their 6 years. "Our mom used to bring us here," Emma said quietly, "before she died." Sarah's throat went tight. "Mrs. Chun said you were infants when she passed." "We were," Ethan said, "but we have pictures. And our dad told us stories. He said she liked this park because it reminded her of where she grew up. She didn't care about fancy things." "She sounds like she was a good person," Sarah said carefully. "She was a nurse," Emma said, and Sarah felt the world tilt slightly. "She worked at the community hospital. She met our dad when he came in for a broken arm from a skiing accident. He was rich, and she was poor, and everyone said it wouldn't work, but they fell in love anyway." Sarah's hands were shaking, and she clasped them together in her lap. "That's a beautiful story. Do you believe in coincidences?" Ethan asked, his green eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that was unnerving. I don't know." "Why?" "Because we don't," Emma said. "We think things happen for reasons. People come into your life for reasons." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from Jen. "Mia asking about you. Call when you can." The twins saw her look at the phone, saw the way her expression softened. "You miss her," Emma said. It wasn't a question. "Every second," Sarah admitted. "Then you understand," Ethan said quietly, "what it's like to love someone that much." They drove to school in silence, and Sarah found herself replaying the conversation over and over. There was something the twins weren't saying, some subtext she couldn't quite grasp. When she dropped them off at the pristine private school entrance, Emma turned back before going inside. "Sarah," the girl called, "do you know any lullabies?" "A few," Sarah said. "Why?" "Just wondering," Emma said, and then she was gone, leaving Sarah with more questions than answers. The second test came that afternoon, when Sarah picked them up from school. They were quiet on the drive home, both staring out their respective windows, and when they arrived at the estate, a black Mercedes was parked in the driveway. "Dad's home," Ethan said, his voice carefully neutral. James Whitmore was everything Sarah had expected, and nothing she'd prepared for. He was in his late 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, with the same dark hair and green eyes as his children. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Sarah's car, and when he looked at her, his expression was guarded. "Miss Monroe," he said, extending his hand. "I'm James. I apologize for not being here for your interview. Work has been consuming." "I understand," Sarah said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, professional, but there was something in his eyes, a grief that lived there permanently, the kind that never quite faded. "The children seem to like you," he said, glancing at where Ethan and Emma had disappeared into the house. "That's unusual. They've made a sport of driving away help." "They're testing me," Sarah said honestly. "I don't blame them. They've lost their mother, and they're probably tired of strangers coming through their lives." Something shifted in James's expression. "You sound like you have experience with loss." "I do," Sarah said, not elaborating. She wasn't ready to talk about Mia's father, about the 3 years of walking on eggshells, and the night she'd finally grabbed her daughter and run. Some stories were too raw to share with strangers, no matter how much they paid. James nodded slowly. "Well, if you make it through the week, we'll discuss a permanent arrangement. Mrs. Chin speaks highly of you, which is saying something. She's not easily impressed." He left for work again within the hour, and Sarah found herself alone with the twins and Mrs. Chun. The older woman was preparing dinner, something elaborate that smelled like rosemary and garlic, while the twins allegedly did homework in the library. He's a good father, Mrs. Chen said without preamble. He just doesn't know how to show it anymore. The grief broke something in him. How long has it been? Sarah asked, though she knew the answer. 7 years. The twins were 6 months old. She died in a car accident on the way home from the hospital. She was doing a double shift because they needed the money. Mrs. Chen's voice was flat, factual, but Sarah could hear the emotion underneath. James has never forgiven himself. He thinks if he'd been less obsessed with building his business, if she hadn't needed to work so much, maybe she would have been home that night. Sarah felt sick. That's not how grief works. Not how blame works. No, Mrs. Chen agreed. But try telling him that. He throws himself into work and pays other people to raise his children, and everyone pretends it's fine. The twins are smart enough to know it's not. That night, Sarah was reading in her room when she heard music. Not the twins moving around, but actual music. Someone humming a melody that was hauntingly familiar. She got up and followed the sound to the twins' bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. Inside, Emma was already asleep, but Ethan was sitting up in bed, humming to himself. And the song, God. The song was one Sarah hadn't heard in 7 years. A lullaby her grandmother had taught her. One she'd sung to Mia as a baby. One she'd stopped singing after her grandmother died because it hurt too much to remember. Sarah pushed the door open. Ethan, are you okay? The boy looked up, and in the dim light from his nightlight, Sarah saw tears on his cheeks. I can't sleep, he said. I keep having dreams. What kind of dreams? About my mom. Except I can't see her face. I just hear her singing. He looked at Sarah with those two old eyes. Do you think that's possible? To remember someone you never really knew? Sarah sat down on the edge of his bed, her heart breaking. I think we remember what matters, even if we can't put it into words. She used to sing to us, Ethan whispered. Dad said so. He said she had the most beautiful voice, and she would hold us both and sing until we fell asleep. He paused. He said the last time he saw her, she was humming a lullaby. He can't remember which one, but sometimes I hear it in my dreams, and I try to hold on to it. Sarah's vision blurred with tears she couldn't let fall. Would you like me to sing to you? Maybe it would help you sleep. Ethan nodded, and Sarah found herself singing without thinking, the lullaby from her grandmother, the one she'd sworn she'd never sing again. Her voice was soft and slightly off-key, but Ethan's eyes drifted closed, and within minutes, he was breathing deeply, finally at peace. Sarah was standing to leave when Emma's voice came from the other bed. You know the song. Sarah turned. The girl was sitting up, staring at her with an expression that was far too intense for a 6-year-old. I know a lot of lullabies. No, Emma said. That one. The special one. The one our dad can't remember, but we hear in our dreams. Sarah's mouth went dry. Emma, I don't. You're her, the girl whispered. Aren't you? You're our mom. And this is where everything shifted, because now it wasn't just about surviving 3 weeks with 2 brilliant, grieving children. It was about a truth Sarah had buried for 7 years, a truth that was clawing its way to the surface, whether she was ready or not. Sarah sank back onto Ethan's bed, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. Emma, your mother died 7 years ago. I'm not. You are, Emma insisted, climbing out of her bed and crossing to stand in front of Sarah. I know you are. We've been watching you. The way you move. The way you look at things. The way you check my fake blood. Dad said Mom was a nurse. You have the same color eyes as us. And you know the song. Lots of people know lullabies, Sarah said, but her voice was shaking. Not that one, Ethan said, sitting up again. We've been searching for years. We asked every nanny, every teacher, every person who came into our lives. No one knew it. Until you. Sarah looked at these 2 small, fierce children and felt the walls she'd built around her past starting to crumble. Emma, Ethan, listen to me. I'm not your mother. I'm. Then prove it, Emma said. Tell us who you are. Tell us why you're really here. Sarah closed her eyes, and suddenly she was back in that moment 7 years ago. The moment that had destroyed everything. She'd been Sarah Whitmore then, married to James for barely 2 years, the twins only 6 months old. She'd been working a double shift at the hospital because they needed the money, because James's startup was bleeding cash, because she'd wanted to help. She'd been driving home at 2 a.m., exhausted and desperate, to hold her babies. And then the car had come out of nowhere, a drunk driver running a red light. The impact had sent her vehicle spinning into a guardrail, and when she'd woken up in the hospital 3 days later, the world had changed forever. James had been there, his face haggard with grief. But he hadn't been looking at her with relief. He'd been looking at her with something else. Accusation. Betrayal. "They found your phone," he'd said, his voice flat. "The police recovered it from the wreckage. There were texts, Sarah. Texts to someone named David. You were having an affair." And Sarah had wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that David was just a friend from work, that the texts were innocent even if they looked bad out of context. But before she could speak, James's lawyer had appeared with papers, divorce papers, custody papers, papers that would strip her of everything. "You nearly died in that crash," James had said, his eyes hollow. "And I was terrified, Sarah. I thought I'd lost you. But then I found out the truth, and I realized I never really knew you at all." He'd paused. "The doctors say you'll need months of physical therapy. Your medical license is suspended pending investigation, apparently. You were too exhausted to be driving safely. And your mother called. She said she's known about David for weeks." Sarah's mother, the woman who'd never approved of Sarah's marriage, who'd always thought James was too good for her daughter, who'd apparently decided that lies would serve her better than the truth. "If you fight me," James had continued, "I'll make sure you never see the twins again. I'll paint you as an unfit mother, exhausted, reckless, adulterous. But if you sign these papers and disappear, I'll set up a trust fund. Enough to start over somewhere else. Enough to make sure you're taken care of." "You're buying me off," Sarah had whispered. "I'm protecting my children," James had said, "from a mother who almost got herself killed through negligence and who was planning to leave us anyway." Sarah had been broken, physically and emotionally. She'd had no job, no money, no proof that the texts were innocent. Her own mother had turned against her, and she'd been terrified that if she fought James, with his money and his lawyers and his pain, she'd lose anyway and hurt her children in the process. So she'd signed the papers. She'd taken the money and disappeared. She'd legally changed her name back to Monroe, her maiden name, and she'd started over in a different city. She'd eventually met someone else, had another daughter, Mia, her miracle, the one thing that made the loss bearable. But she'd never stopped thinking about the twins, never stopped wondering if she'd made the right choice, never stopped hating herself for not fighting harder. And now, 7 years later, they were sitting in front of her, these two brilliant children who'd somehow figured out the truth that everyone else had been content to bury. "I can't tell you who I am," Sarah said finally, her voice breaking, "because it wouldn't be fair to you, because your father believes something about me that isn't true. And if I told you the real story, you'd be caught in the middle of something that would hurt you more than it would help." "You are her," Emma breathed. "You're really her." "No," Sarah said firmly. "Your mother died in that car accident. The woman she was died. I'm someone else now." "That's not how death works," Ethan said, and his voice was so much older than his 6 years. "You're still you. You just had to pretend to be someone else." Sarah stood up, her chest tight with panic. "I need to go. This was a mistake. I shouldn't have taken this job." "Wait," Emma said, grabbing Sarah's hand. "Don't leave. Please. We've been alone for so long. Everyone we love leaves." "Your father loves you," Sarah said desperately. "Mrs. Chen loves you. You're not alone." "But we want you," Ethan said simply. "We've always wanted you." Sarah pulled her hand away, backing toward the door. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But this can't happen. You understand? This can never happen." She fled to her room and locked the door, sliding down to sit on the floor with her back against it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jen with a photo of Mia, grinning despite the scars on her face from the accident that had nearly taken her life 6 months ago. The accident that had happened because Sarah's ex-husband, Mia's father, had been drinking and driving with their daughter in the car. History repeating itself in the cruelest possible way. Sarah had left one abusive marriage only to end up in another. She'd escaped David, not the David from the texts, but the David she'd met 2 years after losing the twins, only after he'd nearly killed their daughter through his negligence. And now she was here, face to face with the children she'd abandoned to protect them, and they were begging her not to leave. She didn't sleep that night. She sat on the floor until dawn, trying to figure out what to do. Leave and protect them from the truth? Stay and risk James finding out? Tell them everything and let them decide? By the time the sun came up, Sarah had made her decision. She was going to leave. She'd tell Mrs. Chun that the job wasn't a good fit. She'd collect her things, and she'd disappear back into the life she'd built. It was the only way to keep everyone safe. But when she opened her bedroom door, both twins were sitting in the hallway, waiting for her. "We need to talk," Emma said. "And this time, you need to tell us the truth." Sarah looked at these two small, determined faces and felt her resolve crumbling. "Okay," she said quietly, "but not here. Let's go to the park. The one you showed me yesterday." They drove in silence, and Sarah used the time to organize her thoughts. How did you explain to 6-year-olds that their mother had been forced to choose between staying and fighting, and possibly losing them forever in a custody battle she couldn't win, and leaving so they could have a stable, safe life with their father? At the park, Sarah sat on the bench while the twins stood in front of her, matching expressions of fierce determination on their faces. "I was in a car accident 7 years ago," Sarah said slowly. "I survived, but the life I'd been living didn't. Your father believed I'd done something wrong, something I hadn't actually done, and he was hurt and angry. I could have fought him, but I was afraid I'd lose. So I took the choice he offered me. I left, and he promised to make sure I'd be okay financially." "He paid you to leave us." Ethan's voice was small. "He paid me to start over," Sarah corrected gently. "He thought he was protecting you from a mother who wasn't good enough. And maybe he was right. Maybe I wasn't strong enough then to be what you needed." "But you're here now," Emma said. "You came back." "I didn't know you'd be here," Sarah said. "I saw an ad for a nanny position, and I needed the money. I didn't know it was your father's house until I arrived. I should have left the moment I realized, but She stopped, swallowing hard. "I wanted to see you, even if you didn't know who I was. I wanted to see that you were okay." "We're not okay," Ethan said bluntly. "We haven't been okay for 7 years. Dad works all the time because he can't stand to be around us. We remind him of you. The nannies all leave because we're mean to them. And we're mean to them because we're angry that they're not you." Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks now, no longer trying to hold them back. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to fight for you. I'm sorry I let you think I didn't want you. I'm sorry for all of it." "Then stay," Emma said. "Don't be our nanny. Be our mom." "It's not that simple," Sarah said. "Your father doesn't know who I am. If he finds out, he'll be angry. He might send me away. And I can't do that to you again. I can't let you get attached only to lose me." "We're already attached," Ethan said. "We've been attached our whole lives. We've just been waiting for you to come home." Sarah pulled both children into her arms, holding them tight as they all cried together. And for the first time in 7 years, something in her chest that had been locked tight and frozen started to thaw. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay. For now. But you can't tell your father who I am. Not yet. I need time to figure out how to do this right." "We can keep a secret," Emma said, pulling back to look at Sarah with eyes that were so much like her own. "We're really good at keeping secrets." They drove back to the estate, and Sarah tried to act normal as she prepared breakfast and got the twins ready for school. But Mrs. Chin knew something had shifted. The older woman's pale eyes tracked Sarah's every movement, assessing and calculating. "They're calling you, Mom, when you're not listening," Mrs. Chun said quietly as Sarah cleaned up the breakfast dishes. "I heard them in the hallway this morning." Sarah froze. "Mrs. Chun, I'm not going to ask questions I don't want answered," the older woman interrupted. "But I will tell you this. Those children have been searching for something since they were old enough to understand what they'd lost. If you're what they've been looking for, then you'd better be prepared to stay. Because if you break their hearts again, I'll make sure you regret it. I don't plan on leaving, Sarah said. Good, Mrs. Chin said. Because James Whitmore is about to come home early today. He called an hour ago. He wants to have dinner with the twins, and he wants you to join them. He's bringing someone with him, his business partner, Victoria Hayes. And Victoria has very strong opinions about who should and shouldn't be around James's children. Sarah's stomach dropped. What kind of opinions? The kind that usually involve getting people fired, Mrs. Chin said. Victoria has been trying to set James up with appropriate women for years. She sees the twins as an obstacle to James moving on with his life. If she decides you're a threat to her plans, she'll find a way to get rid of you. Why are you telling me this? Sarah asked. Because those children deserve someone who will fight for them, Mrs. Chin said simply. And I think you might actually be willing to do that. Victoria Hayes arrived at 6 o'clock, stepping out of James's Mercedes like she owned it. She was in her early 40s, blonde and polished, wearing a cream-colored suit that screamed money and power. When she looked at Sarah, her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. You must be the new nanny, Victoria said, her tone making it clear exactly what she thought of people who work for a living. How long has it been? A week. 3 days, Sarah said evenly. Impressive. Most don't last 48 hours. Victoria turned to James, who'd followed her out of the car, looking exhausted. James, darling, are you sure it's wise to keep hiring help from agencies? I know a service that provides much more refined candidates. The twins like Sarah, James said, his voice carefully neutral. That's what matters. Dinner was excruciating. Victoria dominated the conversation, talking about business deals and social events that Sarah couldn't have cared less about. The twins were unnaturally quiet, both watching Victoria with expressions of barely concealed hostility. So Sarah, Victoria said, turning her sharp gaze on Sarah like a predator selecting prey. What made you want to become a nanny? Couldn't hack it in nursing school. Sarah felt the twins stiffen beside her, but she kept her voice calm. I had to leave school for personal reasons. Becoming a nanny allows me to use some of my medical training, while also having flexibility for my daughter. Oh, you have a child? Victoria's eyebrows rose. How modern. Single mother, I assume. Victoria, James said quietly, a warning in his voice. I'm just making conversation, Victoria said innocently. I think it's important to know who's caring for the children. Don't you, James? After all, you've had such trouble with help in the past. The words were pointed, deliberate, and Sarah saw James's expression close off. Whatever trust had been building between them evaporated in an instant. After dinner, Victoria cornered Sarah in the kitchen, while James was putting the twins to bed. Let me be very clear, Victoria said, her voice low and venomous. James Whitmore is a grieving widower with a weakness for broken things. He hired you because you remind him of his dead wife. Same coloring, same background, same nursing connection. But you're not her, and you never will be. I'm not trying to be anyone, Sarah said quietly. Good, because if I find out you are using those children to manipulate James, if I discover you're trying to worm your way into this family for his money, I will destroy you. I'll make sure you never work again. I'll make sure your daughter suffers for your ambition. Victoria smiled. I have lawyers who are very good at making people disappear. Do we understand each other? Sarah met Victoria's eyes steadily. Perfectly. That night, after Victoria had finally left and James had retreated to his home office, Sarah lay in bed trying to process the threat. She should leave. Every rational part of her brain was screaming at her to pack her bag and run before Victoria made good on her promises. But then she heard the twins creeping down the hallway, heard them whispering outside her door. Do you think she'll leave because of Victoria? Emma's voice worried. I don't know. But we have to do something. We have to make sure she stays. Maybe we should tell Dad the truth. No, not yet. Victoria will use it against her. We need proof first. Proof that Mom didn't do what Dad thinks she did. Sarah opened her door, and both twins jumped. You should be asleep, she said gently. We're scared, Ethan admitted. Victoria always ruins everything. She made the last nanny quit by spreading rumors that she was stealing from Dad. I'm not going anywhere, Sarah said, pulling them both into a hug. I promise. But what if Victoria makes you leave? Emma asked. Then you'll know where to find me, Sarah said. I'll make sure you have my number and your dad's address. No matter what happens, you'll always be able to reach me. Okay. The twins nodded, but Sarah could see they didn't believe her. They'd been abandoned before, and promises meant nothing when adults held all the power. The next morning, James was already gone when Sarah woke up. Mrs. Chin said he'd left before dawn for a business trip to San Francisco. Victoria had apparently accompanied him, which meant Sarah had a few days of breathing room. She used the time to try to find proof. Proof that the text to David 7 years ago had been innocent. Proof that her mother had lied. Proof that she hadn't been planning to leave James. But 7 years was a long time, and her old phone records were long gone. David had moved overseas, and her mother had passed away 2 years ago, taking her lies to the grave. Sarah was running out of options when Mrs. Chin found her in the library, searching through old photo albums that documented the twins' first year of life. You won't find what you're looking for in there, the older woman said. Those were taken after the accident, after you left. Sarah looked up. You know who I am. I've known since the first day, Mrs. Chin said, sitting down across from her. You have the same walk, the same gestures. The twins have your eyes. And you knew that lullaby, the one James said you used to sing. Why didn't you say anything? Sarah asked. Because it wasn't my truth to tell, Mrs. Chin said. But I will tell you this. James kept everything from before the accident. Letters, photos, even your old nursing school textbooks. He has them locked in his office, in a safe that only he can access. He claims he kept them for the twins, so they'd have something of yours when they were older. But I think he kept them because he couldn't bear to let you go completely. Sarah's heart was pounding. Do you know what's in the letters? No, but I know James goes into that office sometimes at night, and he comes out looking like he's been crying. Whatever truth he's holding on to, it's eating him alive. The twins overheard part of the conversation. They developed a habit of lurking in places they shouldn't be. And that night, Emma presented Sarah with a plan. We need to get into Dad's safe, the girl said. If there's proof in there that you didn't do what he thinks you did, then we can show him the truth. Emma, I can't break into your father's safe, Sarah said. That's illegal. It's not breaking in if you have permission, Ethan said. And we give you permission. It's our mom's stuff. We have a right to see it. Sarah knew it was wrong, knew it could backfire spectacularly. But she also knew that Victoria was working to poison James against her, and time was running out. If there was proof in that safe, proof that Sarah had been telling the truth 7 years ago, then it might be her only chance to salvage this situation before Victoria destroyed everything. Okay, she said finally, but we do this carefully. When does your dad come back from San Francisco? Tomorrow night, Emma said, which means we have to do it tonight. James's office was on the second floor, a space Sarah had never been invited into. The safe was behind a painting. Of course it was behind a painting, because rich people apparently love their cliches, and it required both a key and a combination. Dad keeps the key in his bedroom, Ethan whispered, in his nightstand drawer. We've seen him take it out. Getting the key was easier than Sarah expected. James's bedroom was neat and impersonal, like a hotel room, and the key was exactly where Ethan said it would be. The combination was harder. They tried the twins' birthday, James's birthday, even Sarah's birthday, but nothing worked. Wait, Emma said suddenly. Try the date of the accident. The day Mom died. Sarah's hands shook as she entered the numbers. March 15th, 2018. The safe clicked open. Inside was a treasure trove of memories that made Sarah's chest ache. Photos of her and James from their wedding, from the twins' birth, from 100 small moments she'd almost forgotten. Her old nursing textbooks, annotated with her handwriting. A dried flower from their first anniversary. And underneath it all, a folder marked Investigation, March 2018. Sarah pulled it out with trembling hands and began to read. Inside were police reports from the accident, medical records from her hospital stay, and, most importantly, a second investigative report dated 6 months after the accident. We have completed our review of the March 2018 vehicle collision involving Sarah Monroe Whitmore. Our original findings suggested driver fatigue as a contributing factor. However, subsequent analysis of vehicle telemetry data recovered from the manufacturer indicates a mechanical failure in the brake system that would have prevented Mrs. Whitmore from slowing or stopping her vehicle effectively. Furthermore, forensic analysis of the text messages used as evidence of an alleged affair has revealed that the messages were taken out of context and do not indicate a romantic relationship. Witness statements from hospital staff confirm that David Morrison was a professional colleague, and that Mrs. Whitmore's conversations with him pertained to work-related matters only. Finally, we have obtained sworn testimony from Mrs. Eleanor Monroe, Mrs. Whitmore's mother, recanting her previous statements. Mrs. Monroe admits to fabricating claims about her daughter's alleged affair due to personal animosity toward James Whitmore and his wealth. Based on these findings, we conclude that Sarah Monroe Whitmore bears no responsibility for the accident and was not engaged in any behavior inconsistent with her marriage vows. We recommend that Mr. Whitmore be informed of these findings and that any legal agreements based on the original, now refuted, evidence be reviewed for potential revision. The report was dated September 2018, 6 months after Sarah had signed away her rights to her children and disappeared. James had known the truth for more than 6 years, and he'd never come looking for her. Sarah sank into James's desk chair, the folder shaking in her hands. The twins read over her shoulder, their faces pale. "He knew," Emma whispered. "He knew you didn't do anything wrong, and he never told us." "Why?" Ethan demanded, his voice breaking. "Why would he keep this secret?" "I don't know," Sarah said numbly. "Maybe he was ashamed. Maybe he didn't know how to fix what he'd broken. Maybe." The office door opened, and James Whitmore stood in the doorway, still wearing his suit from the plane, his face ashen. "You're home early," Sarah said stupidly. "My flight got moved up." James's eyes went from Sarah to the open safe to the folder in her hands. "How long have you known?" "Known what?" Sarah asked. "Who you are. That you're Sarah. That you're their mother." Sarah stood slowly, putting herself between James and the twins. 3 days. They figured it out on their own. "Of course they did," James said, and his voice was hollow. "They're brilliant, and they've been looking for you their entire lives, even though I told them you were dead." "You told them I died in the accident," Sarah said, her voice hard. "You let them mourn a mother who was alive. Why, James? Why would you do that?" "Because I was angry." The words burst out of him, raw and jagged. "Because I thought you'd betrayed me, and I wanted to hurt you the way you'd hurt me. And by the time I found out the truth, by the time I realized I destroyed our family over lies, you were gone. I couldn't find you. You'd changed your name, disappeared completely. I spent years searching, and I couldn't find you." "You could have tried harder," Sarah said. "You have money, resources, connections. If you'd really wanted to find me, you would have." "I was afraid," James admitted, and now there were tears on his face. "I was afraid you'd hate me for what I'd done. I was afraid you'd take the twins and I'd lose them. I was afraid of a lot of things, and so I did nothing. I kept your things in that safe like a shrine, and I told myself it was for the children, but really it was because I couldn't let go. I couldn't forgive myself." "Dad," Ethan said quietly, "you should have told us. We deserve to know the truth." "I know," James said. "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I lied to you. I'm sorry I kept you from your mother. I'm sorry for all of it." "Sorry isn't enough," Emma said, and her voice was ice. "You stole 7 years from us. 7 years we could have had with Mom. You don't get to just say sorry and have everything be okay." James flinched like he'd been slapped, but he nodded. "You're right. I don't. And I won't ask for forgiveness I don't deserve." He looked at Sarah, his eyes red. "What do you want? Name it. I'll give you anything. Full custody, the house, every penny I have. Just please." Don't take them away from me completely. Let me be part of their lives, even if it's just supervised visits. I'll do whatever you ask." Sarah looked at this man she'd once loved, who'd broken her heart and her trust, who'd stolen years she'd never get back. She should hate him. She should take everything he was offering and walk away without looking back. But she looked at the twins, these two brilliant, wounded children who'd lost so much, and she knew that revenge would only hurt them more. "I don't want your money," Sarah said quietly, "and I don't want to take you away from them. They need their father. But things are going to change, James. We're going to be honest with each other. We're going to put the twins first, and we're going to figure out how to be a family, even if it's not the family we used to be." "You're staying?" James asked, disbelief in his voice. "I'm staying," Sarah confirmed, "but not as the nanny, as their mother, and you're going to have to learn to deal with that." They talked until dawn, the four of them, hashing out logistics and boundaries and all the complicated feelings that came with trying to rebuild something that had been shattered. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was a start. Mrs. Chin found them in the morning, asleep in James's office, the twins curled up on the leather couch, Sarah in the desk chair, James on the floor with his back against the wall. The older woman took one look at the scene, smiled, and quietly closed the door. The first real test came a week later, when Victoria returned from San Francisco and discovered that Sarah was still there, and that her status had changed from nanny to the twins' mother. Victoria's reaction was predictable. She threatened lawsuits, custody battles, exposure. "I'll tell everyone that Sarah abandoned her children," Victoria hissed at James in the foyer, while Sarah listened from the stairs. "I'll make sure the whole world knows what kind of mother she is. Your company will suffer. Your reputation will suffer. Is she really worth that?" "Yes," James said simply. "She is. And if you have a problem with that, Victoria, you can take your business elsewhere. I'm done letting you run my life." Victoria left in a fury, and Sarah knew it wasn't over. People like Victoria didn't give up that easily. But for the moment, Sarah had won. She had her children back, and she had a chance to make things right. The second test came for Mia, who'd been staying with Jen for 2 weeks and was starting to ask questions. Sarah brought her to the estate on a Saturday, terrified of how the introduction would go. "You have other kids?" Mia asked, clutching Sarah's hand as they walked up to the front door. "I do," Sarah said gently. "Twin siblings. Their names are Ethan and Emma, and they're 6 years old. I haven't seen them in a long time, but they're very excited to meet you." "Why haven't you seen them?" Mia asked. "It's complicated," Sarah said, "but I promise I'll explain everything when you're older." The twins were waiting in the foyer, and for a moment, the 3 children just stared at each other. Then Emma stepped forward and said, "Hi, we're your family. Do you want to see our room? We have a train set." Mia looked up at Sarah, who nodded. "Go ahead, baby. I'll be right here." Watching her 3 children disappear up the stairs together, Sarah felt something in her chest finally unlocked completely. This was her family, broken and complicated and nothing like what she'd planned, but hers nonetheless. Over the next few months, they fell into a new rhythm. Sarah and James worked on co-parenting the twins, while James also got to know Mia. It was awkward sometimes, and there were still moments when old hurt surfaced, but they were learning. The twins thrived with both parents in their lives, their earlier chaos and rebellion settling into normal childhood mischief. Mrs. Chen watched it all with her usual sharp eyes, and one day she pulled Sarah aside in the kitchen. "You've done something remarkable," the older woman said. "You've rebuilt a family that everyone else would have given up on." "I didn't do it alone," Sarah said. "The twins did most of the work. They're the ones who refused to give up." "Perhaps," Mrs. Chen said, "but you're the one who had the courage to come back, even when you had every reason to stay away. That takes strength most people don't have." 6 months after Sarah's return, James asked her to coffee. Just the 2 of them. No children, no lawyers, no pressure. They met at a quiet cafe in town, and for the first time since the accident, they talked like the people they used to be. "I don't expect forgiveness," James said, stirring his coffee without drinking it. "I know what I did was unforgivable. I destroyed your life because I was hurt and proud, and I let other people's lies confirm my worst fears about myself." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "I always thought I wasn't good enough for you," James admitted. "You were this brilliant, compassionate person who genuinely wanted to help people, and I was just some guy trying to get rich. When your mother said you were having an affair, when those texts seemed to confirm it, part of me believed it, because I'd always been waiting for you to realize you'd made a mistake marrying me." Sarah shook her head. "James, I never thought that. I loved you. I loved our life together, even when things were hard." "I know that now," James said. "I've had 7 years to think about it, to replay every conversation and realize how wrong I was. I just wish I'd been brave enough to come after you when I found out the truth." "Why weren't you?" Sarah asked gently. "Because I was ashamed," James said. "Because I'd built my entire identity around being the wronged husband, the single father, the man who'd survived betrayal. If I admitted I'd been wrong, I'd have to face what I'd done to you, to the twins, to all of us, and I was too much of a coward to do that." "You're doing it now," Sarah pointed out. "Because you forced me to," James said. "Because you came back and showed me what real courage looks like. You walked back into the life I'd stolen from you, even though it must have been terrifying, and you did it for the twins. You put them first, the way I should have all along." They finished their coffee in silence, and when they stood to leave, James caught Sarah's hand. "I'm not asking you to love me again," he said quietly. "I know I don't deserve that. But maybe someday, if I work hard enough, if I prove that I've changed, maybe we could be friends? For the twins." Sarah squeezed his hand gently. "We're already friends, James. We're just figuring out what that means." A year after Sarah's return, the twins turned 7, and they insisted on having a party at the park, the old, run-down playground where their mother had once brought them in secret. Sarah and James stood together, watching their children play, and for the first time in years, Sarah felt genuinely happy. "They're remarkable," James said, echoing Mrs. Chen's words from months ago. "Despite everything we put them through, they're remarkable." "They're resilient," Sarah corrected. "But they shouldn't have had to be. They should have had both parents from the beginning." "I know," James said, "and I'll spend the rest of my life making that up to them, to all of you." Mia ran over, dragging Emma and Ethan behind her. "Mom, Dad, we want to play on the swings, but we need someone to push us." Sarah's heart caught on that word, Dad. Mia had started calling James that a few months ago, tentatively at first, then with more confidence. James had cried the first time he'd heard it. "Come on," Sarah said, linking her arm through James's. "Let's go push our kids on the swings." They walked across the grass together. Not quite a couple, but not quite separate either. Something in between, something undefined. Behind them, Mrs. Chen sat on a bench with a slight smile, and for the first time in 7 years, everything felt like it might actually be okay. That evening, after the party had ended and the children were in bed, Sarah stood in the doorway of the twins' room and watched them sleep. They looked peaceful, finally. No more nightmares about the mother they'd lost. No more desperate searching for something they couldn't name. "Thank you." James's voice came from behind her, quiet. Sarah turned to find him standing in the hallway, his expression soft. "For what?" "For coming back. For giving me a chance to fix what I broke. For being brave enough to forgive, even when I didn't deserve it." "I didn't do it for you," Sarah said honestly. "I did it for them." "I know," James said. "That's what makes it even more remarkable." They stood together in the doorway for a long moment, two broken people who'd somehow found their way back to each other, not as lovers, but as partners in the most important job either of them would ever have, raising these 3 incredible children. "Good night, Sarah," James said finally. "Good night, James," Sarah replied, and as she walked back to her room, not the nanny's quarters anymore, but a proper guest suite that James had insisted she take, Sarah pulled out her phone and looked at a photo Jen had taken at the party. In it, all 3 children were laughing, their faces bright with joy, and in the background, Sarah and James stood close together, not touching but connected nonetheless. It wasn't the life Sarah had planned. It wasn't the fairy tale ending where everything was magically perfect. But it was real, and it was theirs, and that was enough. 2 years after Sarah's return, Emma asked the question Sarah had been dreading. "Mom, when you left, where did you go? What did you do for all those years?" They were sitting in the garden, just the two of them, while Ethan and Mia played in the house with James. Sarah took a deep breath and decided that her daughter deserved the truth. "I went to a different city," Sarah said. "I got a job as a medical assistant, and I met someone. His name was David, not the David from the texts, but someone else. We got married, and we had Mia." "Did you love him?" Emma asked. "I thought I did," Sarah admitted. "But I was really just trying to fill the space where you and your brother and your father used to be. And David, he wasn't a good man. He drank too much, and he got angry too easily. And one night he drove drunk with Mia in the car. They had an accident. That's how Mia got her scars." Emma's eyes were wide. "Is that when you left him?" "Yes," Sarah said. "I took Mia and we left, and I swore I'd never let anyone hurt her again. And then I saw your father's ad for a nanny, and I couldn't stop myself. I had to see you, even if you never knew who I was." "I'm glad you came back," Emma said, leaning against Sarah's shoulder. "Even if it was scary, even if it hurt, I'm glad you came back." "Me too, baby," Sarah whispered. "Me too." 3 years after Sarah's return, James asked her to dinner, not coffee, but an actual dinner at the restaurant where they had their first date 13 years ago. Sarah almost said no, afraid of what it might mean, but something in James's eyes made her say yes. They talked about the children, about work, about everything and nothing, and at the end of the meal, James reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. "I don't want to rush you," he said, "and I don't want to pressure you into something you're not ready for. But I need you to know, I never stopped loving you. Even when I thought I hated you, even when I was too proud to admit I'd been wrong, I never stopped loving you." Sarah's throat was tight. "James, you don't have to say anything," James interrupted gently. "I just needed you to know. Whatever happens between us, whatever you decide, that won't change. I loved you when we were young and stupid, and thought we could conquer the world. I loved you when I thought I'd lost you forever, and I love you now even more, because I know what it cost you to come back." Sarah squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she admitted. "I don't know if I can give you my heart when you broke it so completely the first time." "I know," James said, "and I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking you to let me keep trying. Let me keep showing up, keep proving that I've changed. And maybe someday, if I work hard enough, you'll be able to trust me again. I'll wait as long as it takes." They left the restaurant hand in hand, and when James dropped Sarah off at the estate, she'd moved into her own apartment nearby, wanting space to process everything. He kissed her forehead gently. "Thank you for tonight," he said. "Thank you for waiting," Sarah replied. For years after Sarah's return, Victoria showed up at the estate one last time. She'd lost her business partnership with James, lost her influence, but she hadn't lost her bitterness. She stood in the foyer, facing Sarah with barely contained rage. "You destroyed everything," Victoria hissed. "James was supposed to move on. He was supposed to find someone appropriate, someone worthy of his status. But you came back and poisoned him all over again." "I came back for my children," Sarah said calmly. "Not for James, not for his money. For the twins who never stopped looking for me." "You're pathetic," Victoria spat. "A poor little nurse who got lucky once and thinks she deserves a second chance. You don't belong in this world." "You're right," Sarah said quietly. "I don't belong in your world. A world where money matters more than people, where pride is more important than family, where you'd rather destroy someone than admit you might be wrong. But I do belong in their world." She gestured toward where she could hear the children laughing in the garden. "And that's all that matters." Victoria left without another word, and Sarah watched her go with something like pity. She'd spent so much time being angry, being bitter, being afraid. But in the end, all that rage had given her was loneliness. Sarah was done being afraid. She was done letting other people's mistakes define her. She was done apologizing for surviving. 5 years after Sarah's return, on a quiet Sunday morning, She woke to find all 3 children piled into her bed, something they did occasionally when they needed extra comfort or just wanted to be close. "Mom," Mia whispered. "Are you awake?" "I am now," Sarah murmured, pulling her daughter close. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Ethan said from her other side. "We just wanted to tell you something." "We're glad you're our mom," Emma added, her voice sleepy but certain. "All 3 of us. We know it wasn't easy to come back, and we know things are still complicated sometimes, but we're glad you did." Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks, happy tears this time, not the bitter ones she'd cried for so many years. "I'm glad too," she whispered. "You 3 are the best thing that ever happened to me." They lay together in the early morning light, a patchwork family that didn't look like anyone's idea of normal but worked anyway. And Sarah thought about the scared woman she'd been 5 years ago, standing outside the iron gates with a single duffel bag and no idea what she was walking into. That woman had been broken, yes, but she'd also been brave. And that bravery had given her this messy, complicated, beautiful life where she got to wake up every morning with her children close and her heart finally whole. James proposed on the twins' 10th birthday, in the same park where Sarah had once told them the truth. He didn't do it with a fancy ring or a grand gesture. He just took Sarah's hand while the children played and said, "I know we've done everything backward and wrong. I know I hurt you in ways I can never fully make right. But I love you, Sarah. I've loved you since the day we met, and I'll love you until the day I die. Will you marry me?" Again, Sarah looked at this man who'd broken her heart and then spent years putting it back together piece by piece. She looked at their children, playing in the distance, finally happy and whole. And she realized that forgiveness wasn't a single moment. It was a choice you made every day, over and over again. "Yes," she said, "but slowly. Let's do it slowly this time. Let's build it right." "As slowly as you need," James promised. "I have the rest of my life to prove I'm worthy of you." They married in a small ceremony a year later, just family and a few close friends. The twins served as joint ring bearers, and Mia was the flower girl, and Mrs. Chin cried through the entire ceremony, despite her best efforts to maintain her usual composure. When James kissed Sarah at the end of the ceremony, she felt something shift. Not a grand transformation, but a quiet settling. A sense of finally being home after years of wandering lost. "Ready to start over?" James whispered against her lips. "Ready to start fresh," Sarah corrected. "We're not the same people we were. Let's not try to be." So what would you have done in Sarah's place? Would you have walked away that first night when the twins figured out who you were? Would you have stayed and fought? Would you have forgiven James? Or would the betrayal have been too deep to overcome? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to know how you would have handled being faced with the children you'd lost and the man who'd taken them away. And if this story resonated with you, maybe consider subscribing. These stories of second chances and unlikely reunions don't just appear out of nowhere. They're here because you take the time to watch, to engage, to be part of this community.